Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice break and got some nourishment, and good to see you all again. Once again, if you would prefer to hear today's workshop in Korean, today we have with us, or this afternoon we have with us Sarah Wan, who is interpreting for us. So you can click on the globe at the bottom right-hand part of your Zoom screen and select Korean. If you'd prefer to hear this workshop in English, you don't have to do anything. I'd like to invite you to please, if you would, introduce yourself in the chat. I know many of you have been part of the gathering in various sorts of ways, but we haven't all been necessarily together at the same time. So if you would just introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, where you are, your connection to Central, that would be great. And we are pleased to have back with us today for our final workshop of Centralize 2021, Shauw Chin Capps, to teach us about nonprofit fundraising. Shauw Chin currently serves as the Foundation President and Chief Development Officer of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship Foundation. So we're excited to learn from her today, and please join me in welcoming back Shauw Chin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Great. And Jessica, I'm assuming I can share screen.
Yes, you can.
Yes, okay, great. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here at the workshop. I might have had the privilege of having the last slot. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is in the afternoon after lunch, so we might be a little, sleepy, and it's Saturday, but really appreciate being with you all today. It's an honor, a privilege, and really glad to see everyone. Yeah, fundraising, it's one of those topics that a lot of us perhaps attend because we sort of have to. May not be our topic of choice, but hopefully this workshop can provide us with maybe a fresh new lens, and maybe if not, perhaps we can sort of recalibrate in that sense with regards to our fundraising efforts and where it's really coming from. I think a lot of times, like any good and holy work, sometimes we can get into the grind of things and perhaps sort of lose our way a little bit, or lose our sense of vision or passion, because things can get mundane and can get heavy. And as such, I think a time to reflect. Sometimes these workshops can be helpful to help us sort of refresh, recalibrate, rethink, and reassess. So hopefully this will be such a time. And I really do want to provide a space, a safe space to talk about this. So full disclosure, some of you have read sort of the introduction of this workshop. And I was one of those nonprofit leaders who sort of just fell into fundraising. I didn't plan for it. I was in my early 30s when I became an executive director. I had no idea what all of that meant. And perhaps that naivete was good in some ways, because maybe if I wasn't so naive, I wouldn't have taken the job. But all that to say, fundraising became sort of, I realized it was something I just needed to do, because if I really believe in the mission of this organization and I was charged with a responsibility to lead, then that responsibility was on me as the executive director to pursue the resources that's needed, right, to do the good work of the mission of the organization. So full disclosure, I was never trained in fundraising. I fell into it. Sometimes I fell really hard, and I learned along the way, picked myself back up, brushed my knees off, and kept going, and then learned some more, and continue to learn. So it's a never-ending journey in that sense, and I'm glad. I think I like that. I like being sort of humbled all the time and grounded in understanding that all of us, there's a lot that we can learn. So I just want to sort of introduce in that way to sort of open this workshop up. And again, I'm only an expert through experience and continued learning. And I'm here to share those experiences, those knowledge, those pitfalls with you all. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now. Hopefully you all can see that. Okay. All right. All right, so show me the money, right? We all, that's like the main thing we want in nonprofit work, whether it's a church, whether it's a seminary, whether it's any kind of other nonprofit work, doing good work. We all know that without the resources, we cannot accomplish our mission. So there is both, I believe, the art and science of fundraising. And I think for people of faith, the art piece of it, I think we really need to start from the very sort of core of who we are as people of faith. And that is our faith. So let's see. Oh, let's see. There you go. So what I would like to do is have some perhaps clarifying questions. How many of you, how many of you have had experience raising funds? If you all can sort of just raise your hand so I can have a quick look for any cause. It doesn't have to be any big institutions. It can be for your daughter who's in Girl Scouts or whatever that might be, or for schools. Okay, so a number of you, all right? And then I think these questions, I don't necessarily need responses, but if you would like to respond, feel free to put it in your chat so I can see some of the responses. But how do you feel when you have to ask people for money? What are some feelings? What are the first words that comes to mind? When about feelings? How do you feel when you have to ask for money? Okay. And what about, let's see if I can get rid of this. And when people ask you for money, how does it make you feel? Give that some thought. When people ask you for money, how does it make you feel? And then these last two questions, certainly, you don't have to answer it out loud, but be thinking about it. What are your feelings about rich people? And on the flip side of that, what are your feelings about poor people? So the reason I ask these questions is because they can help us assess and clarify our relationship with money. Because our upbringing, what we're taught about money from a young age, our cultural values around money, all have an impact on how we approach fundraising. I remember when I was in my childhood, growing up, my parents, my dad's from China. My mom is from Indonesia. She's Chinese Indonesian. And my dad was, when he was growing up in China, he escaped China during World War II when Japan invaded China. And he essentially hopped on a train as a stowaway and made his way to Jakarta, Indonesia, where he knew he had an uncle, they had an uncle there. And his family wanted him to escape in order to preserve, to make sure that someone stays alive. And he got there, he found his uncle, was adopted by that uncle who's a businessman, and became sort of an apprentice. And essentially my father is an example of someone who sort of really made life for himself, from poverty to, I guess, riches in that sense, where he was able to make a life for himself from nothing. So all that shaped his kind of views about wealth, the importance of wealth. And that was, of course, also part of my upbringing, right? So I remembered my parents always drilling this into me and my sisters. That saving was very important. We need to save money. And the second thing I remember clearly, was the reason we should save money is so that we're not dependent on anyone for our basic needs, right? So that was very important, and that was really sort of drilled into us. I remembered even my mom taking me to the bank at a very, very young age and opening a savings account. I was, I think, maybe in first grade, and I had a savings account. I remember holding this book, Post Office Savings Bank, that was in Singapore. And, and I could see the printed pages of the amounts that were deposited every time. So those were just very early memories of my relationship with money and what I was taught. So, the reason for assessing that and knowing what our relationship with money is that's important is because it points to what our security base is, right? There is a reason that talking about money is one of the most taboo subjects, even above sex and religion. Henry Nouwen, in his little book, I think Giving, Spirituality of Giving, I can't remember the exact name, but it's a little book, it's a great book, suggests that money has something to do with that intimate place in our heart where we need security. And we do not want to reveal our need or give away our security for fear that someone might betray us. So the idea of being dependent on someone else often makes us cringe, like just the idea that we're going to burden someone else or depend on someone else for help for anything doesn't really make us feel good, right? There is this pressure in our culture, and I think in many cultures actually, even in my Asian Chinese culture growing up, that to secure our own future and to control our lives as much as possible is what we need to do. That's a real value that we need to have. But interestingly, that value doesn't find support in the Bible. Jesus spoke a lot about money, and there's a reason for that. I think Jesus knows that our human tendencies, and he knows the lure of money because of our deep need to feel that sense of security. And he knows that money can do that. Jesus tells us that we must choose only one master. So as people of faith who have the responsibility of raising funds for churches, for organizations, we must be willing to assess our relationship with money. So here I have two key verses that I think forms the core of our willingness to really dig deep in truly being honest about our relationship with money. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 through 20, this is the popular verses about treasures in heaven, when Jesus said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And then in Luke 16, verse 13, Jesus says, no servant can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So I think back to this question, what is our security base? I'm finding that that's a question that I have to ask myself a lot when it comes to raising funds, because I think ultimately, if our security is still in money and not Christ, then our efforts in raising funds will expose our own insecurities. It can come across as desperate, insincere, even salesy, lacking in passion, So I think, especially as people of faith, it's important. And that's why I truly believe that fundraising for people of faith is a ministry. And all types of ministries, if you think about it, if you're a pastor, if you're a seminary president, whatever that might be, you want it, how you are as a leader in that field comes from the very core. It exposes your values, your core values, and who you really are. And this is true also of fundraising. So, like I said, I believe that fundraising is a ministry. So looking at fundraising from the lens of it being a ministry, fundraising is first and foremost a form of ministry. Henry Nouwen again writes, fundraising is proclaiming what we believe in such a way that we offer other people an opportunity to participate with us in our vision and mission. So it is our mission and vision that lead our fundraising, right? So unfortunately, a lot of times fundraisers fall into, when we fundraise, we fall into this trap of raising funds only when there is some sort of a crisis, a budget deficit, right? Or we're not going to, some sort of crisis. And data actually shows that that type of fundraising is the least effective type of fundraising. Now, I'm not saying that when there's a disaster, that's different. I'm talking about crisis with regards to budget, right? Not earthquakes, natural disasters. That's not what I'm referring to, but I'm talking about crisis within the organization where there's some sort of shortage of money to meet budget. The best type of fundraising is always led by your mission and your vision. So we know how central vision and mission are in the life of God's people. And interestingly, in the book of Acts, which I preached on Thursday at the worship service, has a lot to say about this. I was surprised when I was studying Acts how visions played a huge part in the book of Acts. And I do believe that has to do with the coming of the Holy Spirit. And vision brings together needs and resources to meet those needs. The early disciples in Acts, filled with the Holy Spirit, had a vision of a just and equitable community. That's where we see a glimpse of the kingdom of God. And this led them to share everything they had so that everyone's needs in the community were met. And then in Acts 9, Saul's Damascus Road experience, he had a vision. His vision and Ananias' vision, both of them had visions, and it brought them two together. In Acts 16, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia. Remember, begging him to come and help them? So vision can show us new directions and opportunities for our mission. And then in Acts 18, verse 9, Paul had a vision of God speaking to him, telling him not to be afraid, to keep speaking and not to be silent. And that vision led Paul to stay in Corinth for a year and a half, teaching them the word of God. So vision can also give us courage, which I know is the theme of this event, to speak when we might want to remain silent. So the Ministry of Fundraising is an invitation for others to join us in God's mission and vision for the world. And it's also important to understand that when we see fundraising as a ministry, then we're also called to meet people where they are, regardless of their wealth or lack of, right? First and foremost, I know as fundraisers, we tend to focus on those who have wealth, and rightfully so. We definitely want the wealthy to be generous. But we also know that actually the most wealthy people are not the most generous people. So we would be remiss to just focus our efforts on the very wealthy. Because if you look at any organizations, you look at all their individual donors, you will see that the amount of money raised are from more mid-level type donors as opposed to, there are more mid-level type donors than there are major donors. Right? So we have to meet people where they are, regardless of their wealth or lack of, and never assume. And also, people have such a need for friendship and for community that fundraising has to be about community building, relationship building, what we call relational fundraising, right? It can't be transactional. If it's transactional, then it loses its meaning and people can see right through it. And I wonder how many of our churches and charitable organizations realize that community is actually one of the greatest gifts they have to offer. So fundraising is also about organizations realizing that they have something to offer to the donors. It's not a one-sided relationship, right? So there is that mutuality. I have something as an organization to offer you. And you as a donor have something to offer the organization in support of its mission. When we fundraise, we are inviting people into a community where we offer a friendship, prayer, peace, love, ministry with those in need. These are so valuable that people are willing to make their resources available to sustain them. I mean, look at us here. This is a community, and seminaries gather alumni because they are a community. And the alumni know the importance of these relationships, the importance of theological education, and they form a huge base of support for many seminaries. So fundraising must meet people where they are, regardless of their economic status. It must always aim to create new, lasting relationships. For example, we can ask ourselves, where do we see most community? Where do we see most community in churches and organizations? I think we see community in churches when churches have active ministries, they participate together, where they gather people, they have a mission, whether it's a Habitat for Humanity project, whether it's a mission trip, whatever that might be. That's where you see community, when people are actually doing good together, hand in hand. So we fundraise because we believe in the mission of the church, of the organization. So without the mission, there is no need to raise money. I mean, the only reason that we need to raise money is because there is a worthy mission to support. So that's my hashtag, no mission, no money. But on the flip side of that, without the money, we cannot fulfill the mission. So no money, no mission. And I always say that to nonprofit leaders who are a little squirmish about raising money. And, I always tell them, do you love your mission? And almost always they say, yes, absolutely. Then my response to them is, if you love your mission, then you will not have any qualms about fundraising. because it is that love for your mission that will drive you. Right? So mission and vision, of course, are both essential for an organization's effectiveness. Without one or the other, the development of the institution can go awry. Without mission, vision's energy can become directionless, causing what is sometimes referred to as a mission drift or mission creep. Which, by the way, it's really easy to, it's a trap that can lead a lot of nonprofits into this kind of directionless journey, where there's simply, where the money leads, wherever there's money, I'm going to go for it, right? I learned this along the way when it came to grant writing, pursuing grants. I mean, that's sort of fundraising too, in that you're looking for resources. And at one point fell into the trap of just pursuing whatever grants that there is out there and making my mission fit into what the grant wants, instead of my mission guiding me to look for grants that actually is a good fit for my organization's mission. So there's a big difference there. And we have to be very careful. And that's where mission is really, really important. It can help us have that kind of parameters, healthy boundaries that we can set in order to be very clear about the direction. Without vision, though, mission's strategic focus can become stale, right? Draining leaders and volunteers' motivation as the guiding policies and principles start to feel like they exist for their own sake. So without vision, then things can start to be sort of just the daily grind. There's no energy behind it, no passion behind it. So that's why mission and vision must go hand in hand. And I think this too sort of, this chart here gives some really good points about the importance of mission and vision. And I like it side by side like that because it makes a lot of sense. Like, mission is important because it dictates direction. Vision is important because it describes hoped for future outcomes. So there is this very complementary, this is what mission does, this is what vision fuels, right? So this is, to me, a very helpful way of looking at the importance of mission and vision. Okay, here. I like this. This is a Japanese concept. There's a Japanese concept called ikigai. And it is a concept referring to something that gives a person a sense of purpose, a reason for living. For an organization, it would be that something that gives the organization a sense of purpose and a reason for being. So there is actually a Western version of this. I actually prefer the Japanese version of it, but the Western version of this is sometimes referred to as the Hedgehog Concept. Some of you may have heard of it. Jim Collins is the guy who sort of made this concept a big thing. It's very, very similar. The reason I like the Ikigai concept better is because of the Hedgehog Concept has only 3 components, and Ikigai has 4 components. And the component that is missing from the Hedgehog is this piece right here, what the world needs, which I think is an important piece. So you can see all this, these 4 elements. What is it? Asking yourself these 4 questions. What we are deeply passionate about as an organization, what you love here, right? And What can we be best at? What do we do best? What you're good at. Accompanied by, do we meet a need, some sort of need in this world? And then that last piece is what drives our resource engine, what you can be paid for, what drives our resource engine. And the confluence of the responses of these 4 questions gives you that clarity, which is called ikigai, is that sweet spot right there. So such mission clarity can give us the ability and confidence to say no to opportunities that fail this test, right? So it keeps us, there might be several things we're doing okay in, but it keeps us focused. But what are the things that we're really good at, right? And it provides, again, those healthy parameters for us to be able to really have the kind of clarity of mission that is required when it comes to fundraising. So here, the cycle of effective fundraising involves these components, and they must be repeated. So we talked about the clarity of organizational mission and vision here. And then it's really important when you have that clarity of organizational mission and vision that you are effectively communicating the story of your organization's work, right? The work that you are doing to fulfill the mission and vision of your organization needs to be communicated regularly. What I call impact stories. And then making those aspirational connections of the specific impact of the work to the donor's gifts. So often donors, you will know your donor, and it's a great idea to know where your donors' hearts are, what their passion are, and you can customize and connect their gifts to what they're passionate about to make it much more personal. A lot of organizations from time to time will do these surveys. And doing an annual type survey with your donors can be really helpful in sort of understanding your donors, what they like, what their preferences are, where their passion is. And that way, your communication with them can be a lot more personalized, right? And then there is always going to be an invitation to join the vision and advance the mission by making a gift. So those are your appeals, right? Your direct appeals, whether that's through a phone call, whether that's a letter or more of an email thing. You always want to invite your supporters to join the vision and advance the mission by making a gift. And then when gifts are received, you want to make sure that the donors are thanked promptly. And you want to make sure that if those gifts are designated, that they are indeed used for the very purpose that the donors have requested that they be used for. And then looking at outcomes, checking against your clear mission and vision. This is an evaluation component for organizations. Are your outcomes, your organization outcomes, does it match your mission and vision? And again, doing an annual regular checkup on that is really important. One of the harder things to do in any nonprofits is capturing outcomes, results. But it is worth the time and the investment for each of your program to have an evaluation component that can inform you as a nonprofit leader to see if the results of these programs that you are implementing are actually meeting the mission and the vision of the organization. It gives you an opportunity to tweak. It gives you an opportunity to recalibrate. And it gives you an opportunity to abandon a program and to say, no, that is not a fit. Right? So part of fundraising is about evaluating the results of your organization. And then meaningful mission outcomes and sharing those meaningful mission outcomes in stories, back to telling the story again. Capturing impact stories on a regular basis for an organization, it's a worthwhile endeavor. And being able to tell those stories to your donors is one of probably the most effective method when it comes to cultivating donors. Okay. So essentially, sort of wrapping up on the art side of things for fundraising, when our security base is Christ and our focus is God's kingdom, that makes us mission focused, when we can meet people where they are. And yes, loving the rich for who they are and not what they have. When we believe we have something of great value to give, whether that's community, whatever, that giving people the opportunity to invest their resources in the work of God. When we have that sharp clarity of our mission, and when we believe that God is a God of abundance, then we can ask for money with an attitude and in an atmosphere of confident freedom. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Before I go on, I want to see if there are make time for some questions, to see if you have any questions about what I just shared, or any feedback, any thoughts. I didn't check if there were any chats. Question, Jessica, was there any questions in the chat?
I think the questions that are being asked, Shauw Chin, are can we have your slides when this is over?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, I'll be more than happy to share. I'll send it over to Jessica if that's okay.
I think everyone's interested in having this to
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah,
happy to
get
share
information.
The other thing that I've learned about fundraising is that I don't like to reinvent the wheel. I don't have time. If there's something out there that can be used, I always share, like I say, share widely, no problem at all.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So there's a lot of data out there with fundraising. It was a little hard to sort of boil things down, but I wanted to give some highlights of recent, we're going through some pretty tough times now, as you all know, with the pandemic, and it's been, 18 months down the road, and here we are still in a virtual setting, right? Really, since 2020, the landscape for nonprofits have shifted dramatically. And I think it would be appropriate for us to look at some data that can inform us about where we are, the landscape, and perhaps how we need to tweak some of our strategies. I think prior to this workshop, there was a workshop on change, isn't it? About change, the important, yeah. So
yeah.
I think this would go nicely with what you all may just have heard too. So let's take a look. This is the most recent Giving USA report, 2020 USA 2020 Giving Report. And let's look at some of the highlights here. One thing I want to point out, so this is, where did generosity come from? So this yellow right here, look how big, 69% still comes from individuals. And that hasn't changed, by the way. I don't know how long it's been, but individuals have been majority of the source of generosity, 69%. And you see here that it actually increased 2.2% over 2019. So the good news is people are still generous, individuals. I believe that because we are made in God's image, we do have God's nature of wanting to be generous. I think it is something that is built in. I think we have a desire to want to see good things happen and to do good and to invest our resources in good works. So this explains the year after year, individuals remain the highest when it comes to the source of generosity. And then followed by that 19% from foundations, that also increased 17% over 2019. And then giving by bequest, 9% of the pie chart, but that increased over 10% over 2019. And I'm going to talk more about the opportunities here later. And then, hey, look, corporations, 4%, smallest of the pie chart, right? All of the rich corporations, Amazon, Google, you know, they're not the biggest givers, right? So here's one thing I learned that I always find to be very helpful. When you look at your organizations, does the source of your giving match this? So one of the things that I learned when I was running my nonprofit in Beaufort, South Carolina, 15 plus years, we were very grant dependent. And when I did the math, I realized that majority of our budget came from grants. So, and I learned that I need, if this is the map here of where generosity is coming from, I need to try to match my budget to look like this. Does that make sense? So individuals, so it told me that I need to work harder in getting more individual donors so that I can be less dependent on grants. Because guess what? We all know about grants, right? A lot of them are just 1 year. Multi-year grants are rare. And do you know how many hoops you have to jump through for grants often, especially when it comes to federal grants or state grants? Way too many. And when you have to do that, what does that mean? Your time. And what does time equate? Money. So we have to do the math to see if those grants are worth the effort. And then when it comes to individual gifts, they're also more reliable. Individual donors are more apt to give year after year after year. And you have the opportunity to cultivate them to give more, right? Because you can establish relationships with these donors in a very real and meaningful way that will increase their sense of connection to your mission and your vision. And with that often means the increase of giving as well. So I use this chart always to help calibrate. Okay, am I too dependent on grant? Am I too dependent on foundation? You know, I need to work harder on getting more individual donors, or not just more individual donors, but retaining my donors. That's another important piece, and we'll talk about that too. So looking at where the charitable dollars are going, look at this side of the chart here. Look what's number one. 28% to religion, religious causes, religious organization. That's churches, that's faith-based organizations, 28%. It is also an increase over 2019. And then it goes down the list there. Now, religious giving is narrowly defined as predominantly giving to congregations, denominations, missionary societies, religious media. It grew 1% this past year, but compared to the overall 5% growth across the charitable sector, religious giving continues to lose market share. It is still the largest subsector at 28% of the total giving. The overall percentage has continued to decline, though, rather drastically over the past few decades. It is on the decline. There's more competition on the decline, but still the highest. So we have to pay attention to that. And one of the things the report also states is that the predictor of success for religious organization is the openness to respond to change. Yeah. That is more true now than ever before. And I think we see that even on the very ground level in our churches, which our churches have to pivot very quickly, have to do things very quickly, change things. Ministries are done in such different ways. And Pam, you probably didn't think you're going to be having these virtual events. I didn't either, you know. But we have to pivot. We have to respond quickly. We have to be open to change, open to try new things, open to take risks, to try new things. So the predictor of success for religious organization is the openness to respond to change. So it sounds pretty biblical to me that new wine requires new wineskin. And we need to be able to do that as nonprofit leaders. Okay. Here, I quote Jerry Panis. He's an expert sort of fundraiser person, has written a lot of books. You can Google him or go to Amazon, type his name, and tons of his books will come out. I've used a number of his books. He says that there is no perfect moment to raise money, right? There is no such thing as a time when all possible factors are in your favor. I get that question a lot. When is it the best time to, when is it? It's like the best time is now. Just you have, there is no perfect time. However, establishing a calendar of your fund development activities can help with providing a consistent rhythm. And I have found that to be very helpful. And it also keeps me sane when I have a calendar and I know what's going to be happening. And I encourage nonprofit leaders to develop that calendar at the end of each year. Set out your calendar for the next of all the fundraising activities that's going to be happening. And let me tell you why this is helpful. It allows you, first of all, to take a step back, not just to run from one event to the next, from one fundraising activity to the next. It gives you time to really step back and to really evaluate, and also to think about spacing things out, right? You want to space out your appeals, for example, and you can be more strategic. Between appeals, let's insert some impact stories with no asks. And then layer it with just messages of thanking your donors. So you can see the big picture. You can put it on your calendar where there is a rhythm of, okay, this is when our appeals are. And in between, we're going to do this, impact stories, thanking our donors, impact stories, thanking our donors. And you also want to be sure that your appeals are not too close together. You do want to be careful to not over ask in that sense, or you want the communication with your donors to be strategic. I guess that's the best way to put it. Right? You want, every time you have an appeal, you want to make sure it's very targeted, very intentional. So you don't want your donors to be receiving an appeal, every month, right? So, you want to find the times, do I want to do it 3 times a year? Do I want to do it 4 times a year? You want to just make sure that those are spaced out accordingly. And remember that donors are getting savvier. They desire transparency, accountability. They want to see data. along with a deep desire to make a difference. So knowing that as nonprofit leaders, what can we do to satisfy that desire for transparency and accountability? Putting your budget on the website, making it clear where money is going to, or your annual audits, making sure that you're fiscally responsible, any kind of data, transparency and accountability are key. And being able to show your donors that can make a difference. And here, Jerry Penis says this too. People give, the three main reasons that people give to institution. First and foremost, they believe in the mission of the institution. They hold staff leadership in high regard. And the institution is fiscally responsible. Those are the three main reasons. So if we know that, then this can become a work plan for nonprofit leaders, right? How do I make the mission of my organization front and foremost? How do I make that a priority? How do I convey that in my messages, in my literature, in materials, on the website, in my stories? And then how does this inform, holding staff leadership in high regard should inform who we hire, how we supervise, right? How do we ensure that we have that high level of staff leadership? And last but not least, how do we ensure fiscal responsibility within our institution? So those three things can actually help us to hone in on the things that we need to work on as nonprofit leaders to be effective fundraisers. I like this quote by Brené Brown from her book, Dare to Lead. She says, "It turns out that trust is in fact earned in the smallest of moments. It is earned not through heroic deeds or even highly visible actions, but through paying attention, listening, and gestures of genuine care and connection. Trust is the stacking and layering of small moments and reciprocal vulnerability over time." There's a lot of wisdom in that quote for leaders. So what does that say to us? Leadership experts James Kouzes and Barry Posner pose this critical question: how do you define credibility behaviorally? Think about that question. How do you define credibility behaviorally? What is the most common response to that question, you think, that people say? The most common response is this: they do what they say they will do. This straightforward definition leads to a simple prescription for strengthening personal credibility. Do what you say you will do. So never underestimate the power of following through. And I have found that to be true over and over and over again in my nonprofit work. It matters when you respond to an email. It matters when you say you're going to give someone information and you get back to them within 24 hours, business day, and provide them with what they need. People appreciate those small gestures of follow through. And for you, what it builds up is that trust and credibility. You know that phrase that says if you can be trusted with small things, right? Then you can be trusted with big things. It's so true. So here, this definition of do what you say you will do is very helpful in thinking about individual integrity and credibility. However, when it comes to organizational integrity and credibility, we may need a little more, right? So Kouzes and Posner are also clear in saying that leaders must be consistent not only with their own personal values, but also with the core values of the organization. So they say credible leaders serve a purpose, and they serve people who have made it possible for them to lead. They put the guiding principles of the organization ahead of all else, and then strive to live those principles. So it's really important that our supporters and our donors see that in us, because the credibility of you as a leader of an organization is super important. So I want to share this one of the, it's probably like one of the simplest. There is, first of all, there is no magic in fundraising. And I learned this from a mentor of mine in my nonprofit career, who was the person that taught me all about fundraising. And she told me that there are essentially these three things that if you can keep these three things in mind, this essentially forms a formula for you and direction on what you need to be doing when it comes to strategy. First and foremost, when it comes to your donors, you want to keep them, yeah? Retain them. So find out what your attrition level is each year for donors. Donors who gave last year but didn't give this year. Where's the attrition? And what are the strategies you can put in place to retain donors? Ask yourself the questions. Why might this donor have not given this year? Have we even taken the time to reach out to him or to her and find out? Are they unhappy about something? Or perhaps it's a personal life situation and circumstance where you actually have the opportunity to reach out and show your genuine care for the person. You know, you don't have to take it personally. Just because someone didn't give this year and gave last year, didn't give this year, doesn't mean they hate you. You know, but find out, take the time, and find ways to retain donors. And the ways to retain donors are keep them informed, tell them how their gifts have been used, the impact that they're making. Remember that cycle thing that I showed you? That's how you keep your donors. Now, I know that a lot of nonprofits will always want new donors. You always say, we need to bring in new donors. We need to bring in new donors. Yes, absolutely. We want to cast our nets always wider and get new donors in. But sometimes that's done at the expense of the donors you already have. If you want to look at it from a sort of financial perspective, retaining donors has a much higher value than getting new donors. Do you know why? First of all, the fact that they're already donors should tell you something. They already like you. They have an affinity to your mission. So you're already ahead with donors who are already giving. Whereas with new donors, you have to work quite a bit harder. In fact, for new donors, by the way, the formula is 7 touches before they even begin to give. Average of 7 touches, meaning sending them newsletter, calling them, meeting them face-to-face, inviting them to an event, like keeping them like 7 times, 7 separate touches before a prospective donor becomes a donor of your organization. But when you already have a donor who's already giving, they're already giving, and they have the ability to increase their gift. So, you really want to balance your work with getting new donors and taking the time to take care of your existing donors. And then lifting, lifting, which is increase the revenue per donor. This is another thing you can look at each year. At the end of each year, calculate what the average revenue, average gift per donor is, and see if they increase each year, right? And the way that you increase the revenue per donor, there's no magic. You ask for an increase. Ask and you will receive. If you don't ask, 100% you will not receive. If you ask, increases your chance by 50%. That's pretty good. So you ask. So usually you want to implement a formula. If you do like every year at the end of the year, you have a campaign, a holiday campaign, year-end campaign to give an appeal, put in a formula. Last year you gave $10. This year, would you consider a gift of $15, a gift of $20, right? Whatever formula you use. And sometimes you can break it down, for major donors and mid-level donors, again, depending on how big your organization is. Use a formula to ask for an increased gift. And by the way, when you do an appeal, let people, if it's your existing donor, let them know what they gave last year. I don't know about you, but I want to know. Like I don't remember, I give, I may give to multiple places. It would be nice to know what I gave to you last year. And that actually increases their willingness to give you more if they know what they gave last year. Then they can make a judgment for themselves. You know what, I can afford more. I can give more. Maybe they can't give to the level that you are asking, but maybe they will increase a certain level, right? But knowing what they gave last year is helpful and can help them plan for their gift this year. And then you want to move, accelerating the movement and number of mid-level donors to major levels, right? So every organization defines their major givers different ways. So it depends on how your organization defines major donors, and you would need to define them. Some smaller organization, 500 and up, maybe major donors. Others may be, $5,000 level. Others may be higher. But you always want to look at your mid-level donors and be able to see the ones who have the capacity to give more and be able to really cultivate them to move into the major donor level. So keep, lift, move. Repeat, keep, lift, move. Okay. All right, here, I wanted to give you a little bit of snapshot from Lake Institute on Faith and Giving. They do a good job with faith-based giving and looking at trends within congregation. They do a lot of research around this. And they did a study on church giving since the pandemic started. And these are some of the highlights that can help us understand the landscape of giving within congregations. So I want us to just sort of, again, I will share these slides, of course, but take a look at some of these highlights. This is an interesting one. Since the beginning of the pandemic in March last year, a slight majority of congregations reported an increase in participation. Guess why? Well, more accessible. We have people from other parts of the world that can join and different parts of the country. So accessibility from the virtual component has actually, churches have seen an increase in participation. And then there is a reported over the same time, a plurality of congregations, about 41% reported a decline in giving. So this decline is real. Okay. almost half of congregations reporting a decline in giving. And congregational giving overall was down 4.4% from March to June of 2020 compared to the same period in 2019. And in June, that decline increased to 6%. And this is no surprise here that small congregations under 50 weekly participants reported declines in participation and giving more often than any other groups. So it's the smaller congregations that are the hardest hit. In the study sample, 65% of the congregations received the PPP loans. Catholic parishes and larger congregations were much more likely to apply for PPP funds. And we might think that more congregations were doing reductions, layoffs, but the study shows that only 14% of all congregations reported reductions, layoff, or furloughs of staff. And then when it comes to planning for their budget moving forward, not a single congregation expects to increase next year's budget. 52% of congregations hope to maintain their current budgets over the next year. So these are some, I think, helpful insights in looking at the state of congregational giving. So the other important trend that we should be paying attention to and taking note is what is referred to as the greatest wealth transfer that is happening right now and into the next 20 to 25 years. So if, as nonprofit leaders, if we're not paying attention to this is important, y'all. Over the next 25 years, an estimated 30 to 60 trillion will be passed on as the large and wealthy baby boomer generation ages. This is the largest wealth transfer in human history and maybe the biggest opportunity for philanthropy ever. So either we know this data and allow it to inform our strategies, or we miss out on this trend that can really be helpful to our fundraising efforts for our organizations. And along with that, the reason is the coronavirus pandemic also is driving an incredible increase both in the number of people making wills as well as the number of bequests made in wills. So in March of 2020 alone, let me show you this graph here. Free Will, which is a nonprofit organization that we have actually partnered with, they offer a online will writing platform that is free to, of course, we have an annual fee with them, but they're able to customize the platform for our organization, and donors can develop their will. It's like the TurboTax of will writing is the best way to describe it. State specific, legal will. I've used it, my husband has used it. Literally takes you, unless you have a complicated will, which I would always still suggest that you seek out the advice of an attorney. Those of us who, we don't have that complex of an estate. This will takes about 30 minutes online to go through. And the nice thing is it takes you through. Once you put in your address and it knows exactly the state you're in, it will follow the state specific laws of will development and takes you through. What they saw, they're a planned giving site, Free Will saw a 400% increase in bequest giving during the week of March 23rd through the 30th as compared to the same time in 2019. 400% increase. And since the start of March, they've raised more than $230 million in new planned gifts for 6,000 individual bequests. Experts and nonprofit records show a sharp increase in planned giving in every recession, and this one appears to be particularly so. So this is another trend that I think we need to pay attention to. And what is interesting is as the pandemic appeared to be subsiding in May and June, when vaccinations became more widely available, wills and bequests began to drop back to prior levels. Then as the infections re-emerged aggressively throughout the US, the numbers went back up in August. Wills with bequests increased by nearly 300% over the same time last year. So people are leaving bequests in their will. So the lesson to learn here is that people are thinking more about their mortality because of the pandemic. Many people do have the desire to do good with the resources they are leaving behind. So one of the things that nonprofits may be struggling with in terms of this is, isn't it tacky to ask for someone to leave a bequest, especially during a pandemic? Can it come across as insensitive? Those are great questions. And I think it's wise for us to think about how we message that. I certainly think we need to be sensitive, but I really do believe there's a way to genuinely reach out to our donors, to be asking them to think about leaving a bequest for your organization. As nonprofits, we do have the opportunity to reach our supporters about the importance of estate planning, using thoughtful, sensitive messaging. Organizations can connect with their supporters on a deeper level, meet their needs, and continue to effectively generate much needed funds for their mission. My experience in talking with donors about planned gift have been really positive. People are surprisingly open when you're able to broach the topic. What you think is sort of a taboo topic, but when you open it up and you're genuine about it, you will find that people are actually, they really want to talk about their passion. They want to talk about the legacy they want to leave. They like the fact that you are taking the time to hear them out. And this next slide perhaps can tell us a lot. A lot of our donors, especially our older donors, have been isolated. And even the younger ones are working from home. There's this sense of isolation that makes them more eager to connect. And nonprofits, professionals are telling us that they're finding that their donors are a lot more responsive to phone calls, email outreach. They say that they're thrilled to connect. And I have found that to be true when I call donors. Even those that I may not have I'm relatively new in this role, just being able to connect with them has been really, really good. And I found that they always talk longer than I imagined they would talk, which is great. And it really was true that, they are craving this kind of connection. And we should, if we can offer this a sincere way of really caring about our donors, then they will respond. And they do want to connect with us. And not surprisingly, here you will see that 64% of nonprofits are increasing digital outreach, right? This is no longer an option really for nonprofits. And 69% are increasing phone calls to their donors. So, good old-fashioned phone calls can still work. So it is possible to message to your donors about thinking about leaving legacy and bequest gifts to your organization during this time. And we should be taking advantage of this time to really message our requests in a way that's genuine and in a way that focuses on the donors' love for your mission and for the future of your organization. Here, I want to show you this piece of data here, which I think to me was really helpful. That planned giving has the highest return on investment compared to all other fundraising types. So the ROI, return on investment per $1 spent. You can see here with direct mail, this is how much per $1 spent, you get $3.60, 66 cents back. Lotteries and raffles, special events, right there. I always tell people events are not the best way to raise funds, and this confirms that. Major giving, of course, is pretty high, but planned giving even exceeds. For every dollar spent, you get $56.83 back. And some people may say, well, planned giving, you know, I mean, that's essentially, it takes so many years to be realized, right? Surprisingly, the data shows that on average, once an organization implements a legacy giving or planned giving program, it takes an average of 3 years to see the returns. Not as long as we think. So it's important for your organizations to know that you are an organization that can receive planned gifts and bequests, and you can offer support on how to give or designate those bequests. And it's really important to be able to let your donors know if you have endowment funds, your donors should know about that. Because if they want to leave a bequest and give it to that endowment, or if you have different types of funds, make sure that your donors know that so they know how to direct their bequest gifts in their will. So often there's this debate about annual giving versus planned giving, right? What I hear is, oh, I don't want to ask this donor for a planned gift because then once she gives a planned gift, then she's not going to be giving to me annually because I need the money right now. I can't afford to lose their annual gift. So, hey, the good news is that we don't have to choose over one or the other. Donors who are the most likely to make a planned gift are your annual donors. Because people who make a planned gift are the ones who know your organizations. And they have a high affinity to your mission. They are the ones, your annual donors are the target for planned giving. Because they love your organization, they're giving consistently. It's a low-hanging fruit. Planned giving impacts annual giving, but only in a positive way. Look at this, Dr. Russell James here found that donors who make a planned gift increase their donations in their subsequent 5 years. So what he found is once donors make a planned gift to an organization, they increase their annual donations in the subsequent 5 years by an average of 75%. And this graph shows like before they're making a planned give and the increase, and then you have a mixed pool here. It starts increasing more. And here it's after they have made a planned gift. And you see how their annual giving jumps after year 2, after year 4. But it keeps, even as it goes down, it still increases over their before making a planned gift time. So the data is showing us that people who actually give planned gifts will also increase their annual gifts. And it's not surprising, right? Because if they're making a planned gift, they're thinking about the future of your organizations. These are the donors who want you to succeed in the now as well as the future. So that is encouraging to know, and it was helpful for me when I learned that it's not one or the other. It doesn't have to be a competition in that sense. Okay, so I've shared a lot of data, and my intent for this workshop is to provide you with some foundational core values when it comes to fundraising, especially as people of faith, looking at fundraising as a ministry, and then some also helpful practical tips and data that can help inform our strategies. And I hope that all that has been helpful. And last but not least, I wanted to quote Maya Angelou, one of my favorite poets of all time. She has a lot to say about generosity as well. I have found that among its other benefits, giving liberates the soul of the giver. And those of us who give generously know that this is true, that to be able to give, there's something liberating and freeing. And I want to end with this story of in my early career, when I was doing my first capital campaign and I had to make my very first major gift ask. I was scared to death. I was like, oh my gosh. And it was this donor who I have known for a while, and he's an annual giver. He's a Christian. He's actually attends a Presbyterian church. He's a leader in the community. And I had a one-on-one with him, met with him, and my goal was to ask for a $10,000 gift from him. And I stumbled over my words and made the ask. And this gentleman looked me straight in the eye and he said, Shauw Chin, I want you to know that when you ask someone to give, when you ask me to give, it is an honor and a privilege to be asked. He said, always remember that. And I will never forget what he said. And that has stayed with me and sustained me for a long time, remembering that the donor herself and himself receives the benefit, and they consider it an honor and a privilege. And I've also learned that even when donors say no to me, I mean, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to melt away and, it's okay. And perhaps, from a faith perspective, maybe their resources needed to go somewhere else just as important or more important. There's so many reasons that people may not give at this time. And it's not terminal. It's not like they're not giving, they say no to me now and they're going to say no next time too, right? So, there's a lot of times we have to take a step back and realize that when we ask someone, they have stories around them, and there are many different reasons as to why they may be able to do it now or not. Oh, by the way, the gentleman did say yes to the 10,000 he gave my very first major gift. And it was amazing. And I will always remember that moment and always very grateful for his wisdom, his kindness, and his grace. And I have found that to be true of many, many donors who are gracious and really see their ability to give as a gift. And they're very humble about it too. So I want to just kind of stop there and end with that story and see if there are any questions or comments.
I appreciate how practical this has been, Shauw Chin. It's just packed full of good information.
Good, good. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I'm just looking through some of the chats to see if I've missed anything.
I have a
Yes.
question, if I may. I know we running out of time.
Sure.
So Shauw Chin, you have the Asian origin. I know you are fully integrated into the mainstream society, but then there are times when you have to turn to ethnic groups. Like, I mean, for me, it's Korean American community that I always try to reach out to. And we are still in the nascent stage when it comes to, fundraising and also giving and philanthropy. Have you come across any some similar challenges because you were turning to some of the ethnic communities? Because we here at Central, we have a large Korean student population, and one of the challenges that we always try to solve is how to tap into, the resources maybe the Korean community might have.
Right, right. That's a great question, John. I think first and foremost, I think that the relationship piece is key. I think that is universal, regardless of culture. So I think the part of the art of fundraising is just really being able to listen to where people are coming from. And certainly while I am integrated into, the majority culture here, I've also had experience with raising funds with other minority POCs and groups. And I have to always, it's all about learning the individual, right? About the individual. And I think even with working with minority groups, POCs, I also have to be careful not to overgeneralize, each person. I want to be able to, one of the things that social work has taught me is this, that has served me well: meet people where they are. That's it. And to me, that is probably as effective a strategy for fundraising, is meeting people where they are, listening to their story, find ways, when you're talking to an individual, find ways to connect. What are ways that we can connect? What are similarities? What's their passion? So it's all about, to me, it starts with a relationship. I think that's where I would focus on, John, is the relationship itself.
Okay, thank
and
you.
Allow that donor to teach me about their culture,
yes,
about what's important to them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, I think I went over time. I didn't give enough time.
Okay, it was wonderfully great information. So very appreciative.
You're welcome. This was fun. I had fun putting it together.
Oh, that's good too. That's when you know you have a good presentation.
Yeah. There's a lot to be discussed, in terms of the theology of fundraising. Lake Institute actually has a whole entire course about that. So you might want, those of you who are interested, they do provide trainings for faith-based leaders on fundraising, which I would strongly encourage you all to participate. I think it's super helpful.
And one of the people who teaches at Lake Institute is on our board, Gary Dollar.
There you go.
It's all kinds of good connections.
Yeah. I will provide the slide deck to Jessica. And Jessica, I'm assuming you can share it with everyone,
yes,
right?
Yes, I will definitely do that. Yeah.
And that's please, there's no copyright on anything on that slide. If you want to use it, share freely. Part of being in this space is being able to share resources too, right? So please feel free to share. And you have my information. Reach out to me if you have any questions. Would happy to connect with you all even outside of this space today. But thank you so much for having me, Pam, and the Central Alumni community. I'm so grateful to be with all of you today.
We're blessed to have you with us. So thank you so much, both for preaching on Thursday and panel and this workshop today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You all have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Well, we will move just right into our closing celebration. I called it a celebration, but it's really a chance for me to give just a couple brief announcements and say a whole lot of thank yous. So it will be brief. You all are troopers for hanging in there today. Hold on just a little while longer. But I'm just so grateful for each person that has joined this inaugural alumni gathering throughout the last 3 days. We have worshiped together, learned together, connected, been challenged and inspired. And I hope that each of us will leave this gathering with new knowledge, with renewed courage, as well as new connections to the Central family. If you would, I would love it if you would just leave a one-word comment in the chat about your experience for whatever part of this gathering you have attended. And while you're doing that, I just want to share a few announcements with you. First, I hope that you all have been receiving the Central Connection, which is our monthly alumni newsletter. Comes out the first week of each month by email. In that newsletter, we feature an alumni spotlight each month to highlight the impact that one of our alums is having in their ministry context. I'm currently working on a web page. I shared the other day some of the web pages that are up for the on the alumni section of the website, and one more that needs to go up there that many of our alums have asked for is a page about alumni news and notes. So I've been saving some of that information about celebrations, ordinations, publications, retirements, celebration of life services, and a plan to put that up on a web page. So you can be looking for that and be sure to stay up to date with the alumni community through that page and through the newsletter. And the link for to update your information to be sure we have your correct information for that newsletter is in the chat. Also, just a quick reminder to be sure to mark your calendars for Thursday, November 11th at 6 p.m. Central Time, when we will join together virtually to celebrate 120 years of Central and 10 years of Korean programs at Central. So more information is available on our website and through the link in the chat. Also, I would be remiss, as I'm Director of Alumni Engagement, but also Lifelong Learning. So want to be sure to mention some of the lifelong learning opportunities we have coming up. We plan these for the Central community, and specifically I have alumni in mind with those. We have a monthly Lunch and Learn, third Thursday Lunch and Learn, and coming up in October, or I didn't write down the date, but the October Lunch and Learn is October 21st at noon Central Time. And this month, October, will feature President Durso in her ongoing research about the influence of Baptist women clergy. So that will be a very helpful and enlightening session. Also, we host a monthly Reshaping Church conversation. The next one in November will feature October. The next one in October will feature Reverend Susan Sparks, who is pastor at Madison Avenue Baptist Church. She was my ordination mentor, and she's also a stand-up comedian. And she'll be leading us through a session called Preaching Punchlines about using humor in sermons. So the link for the lifelong learning opportunities is in the chat. You can find places to register for all of the upcoming events that I just mentioned, as well as some of the videos of past events. I just encourage you to poke around the whole Central website to find many more useful resources. There's a current list of ministry opportunities, Central's YouTube page for any of the alumni sessions that you may have missed, as well as a bunch of other good information. And please always know that as Director of Alumni Engagement, I'm here to connect with you and serve you. And so please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is in the chat with ideas, suggestions, questions, concerns. Next announcement is I'll be sending along a final Centralize 2021 email that includes an evaluation for this event, as well as some of the slides from today. Your insights and feedback will be really helpful for building upon this event and for planning for the future. If you'd like to fill that out now, the link is in the chat, or you can wait until you've had some coffee and fill it out a bit later. But please go ahead and take the time to fill that out if you would. It's pretty short, but will give us a great idea of how to improve and build upon what went great and what we can do differently, especially as we begin to think about the possibility of hosting this gathering in a hybrid format in the future. So lastly, all of the thanks. No event like this is possible without many, many, many people to make it so. So even though our three speakers are not here at this moment, I just want to say a huge thank you to each of them for their time, their wisdom, the stories that they have shared, the learnings that they have shared with us. I'm thankful to each person that participated in leading any part of any of these sessions, and especially Hannah, Pam, and Angie, who had multiple places where they led multiple kinds of things. Kay Lee is the executive assistant to President Durso and helped to coordinate some of the email communication. So we made sure to have updated email addresses. And so I give a big thanks to her. And also a huge thanks to our three translators for the week. John Park did double duty. And we also got to enjoy the translation from a couple translators new to the Central community, including Sarah, who is translating for us right now. And also a huge thank you to Rochelle, who throughout this gathering has just served with flexibility and grace and competence to get all the things in the chat and screen share and just everything to make Zoom work really well. And I'm very, very thankful for her to her for that. So as we come to this time of closing, yes.
Because I am president, I get presidential privilege, right?
Sure, of course.
I think we need to say a great big thank you to Jessica, who took a dream and turned it into this reality of 3 days. So we'll give her applause and say, thank you, Jessica. This was so well organized, so thoughtful, so inspiring, and our hearts are full. And you are the one who did this and put this together and invited other people to join in this work. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed being with you all. Thank you, Pam. So as we come now to closing, I just want to ask that again, building on what I've just learned from Shauw Chin, you should ask for gifts. So please consider making a gift to Central. As Angie presented to us yesterday as well, that link is now again in the chat. Your giving helps make gatherings like this possible. And especially as we look forward to the day, hopefully soon, hopefully 2022, when we might be able to gather in a hybrid format. I have really valued the opportunity to be in the space with some of our alums from around the world, and look forward to the opportunity to be face-to-face with some as well. And so I really want to think about doing a hybrid event where we can be both in person and virtual. To do that, we need to upgrade some of our technology at the seminary. And so your gifts can help us to do that. So please consider giving. And of course, consider supporting Central through purchasing something through the apparel store and showing off your Central pride. Not only do you get to sport some awesome clothes by doing that, but 15% of it comes back to the seminary.
They told me my t-shirt comes in 4 days.
Hey, that was quick. We want to see a picture when you get that, Eric, please. You do.
Okay.
That'd be great.
You got it, Jessica.
Thank you. Finally, and most importantly, I'd ask for you to support Central through your prayers. Please pray for our administrators, for our faculty, for our staff, for our students, and for one another, for your fellow alumni. The most important way that we can support the Central community. So as we leave this virtual space together, I'd also ask that you would just keep your prayer card for Myanmar in a place that is important to you, so that you can continue to remember all the people of Myanmar, and especially those in Myanmar who are part of the Central community in your prayers. Pam and I had a chance to visit last night with a couple of our Doctor of Ministry alums from Myanmar after the event, and they continue to ask for prayers. As you heard Jiwam say earlier today, many people are not leaving their homes because of the violence that is surrounding them in their communities. So please continue to pray for the people of Myanmar, and particularly those who are connected to Central. I also hope that you might hold on to and treasure the ribbon that you received, for these are a symbol of the ties that bind us and bind our hearts in Christian love and the community of the Central family. So now as we leave this gathering, may you be blessed by our God, the Creator, Jesus Christ, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And may God be with you till we meet again. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Hmm.